Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews. It's your host Ian.
Hello.
And Gary. And today we're going to talk about the Maniac Cop Trilogy, starting with the first one, which came out in 1988 at the end of the grindhouse phase of independent movie making.
Yeah.
In the era of slasher movies, we get Maniac Cop from director William Lustig, who back in 1980 had just made Maniac, which had some particularly gory scenes at the time, especially Tom Savini's kind of head exploding in the car, shotgun blast. Absolutely awesome. So he's made the Maniac Cop trilogy, and it's also interesting just to say from this point that he actually directed all three movies, although we'll get into that later on.
Yeah.
But it was also written by Larry Cohen, who was also responsible for writing movies such as The Successful Phone Booth, going all the way back to Cue the Winged Serpent and The Stuff.
Yeah, The Stuff.
And of course, he also wrote all three Maniac Cop movies. And also to say that Maniac Cop has got quite an interesting cast behind it. We've got Tom Atkins, who sort of plays the lead character for the movie. We've also got Bruce Campbell and Laureen Landon from such movies as Hundred and Airplane 2. But Ian, why don't you just give us the synopsis for Maniac Cop?
Well, the story follows a maniac cop walking the streets of New York and killing innocent people. He is trying to frame another police officer, played by the awesome Bruce Campbell, into taking the rap for his crimes so that he can infiltrate the police HQ and kill the police commissioner and the mayor. This film is a cult classic. I mean, from the offset, you're just shoved into the dark, grimy streets of New York. Innocent woman walking down the streets. She gets almost mugged by two muggers, chased into an area, and you have this just awesome shot of her running to this giant police figure. She gets up close and she's like, "Oh, you've saved me." And then all of a sudden he picks her up and snaps her neck in two and throws her to the floor, and you're like, fuck.
It is a brutal introduction to this character, and for the most part you just think that this is going to be your bog standard slasher movie where it's just a maniac cop just offing people. But there's a lot more substance to this movie, especially with the New York setting as well, where you've got this, where it's got this reputation for the police brutality.
Yeah.
And so having this police officer that is killing people, or killing innocent people, it kind of, throughout the movie, it gives this sense of dread throughout all of the population of being afraid of the police officers, which there is a kind of undercurrent there already.
Yeah.
And that kind of reaches a crescendo in the movie as well. And that's also to say that New York is a massive part of this movie.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they only shot there for 3 days and the rest of it was shot elsewhere, it definitely has a massive New York vibe to it, which, I mean, I half expected to see Jason Voorhees walking along at one point, but I love all of the New York sort of characters, whether it's the newsstand operators or the presenters, just that feel and the vibe of the rundown sort of city that we see. And of course you see the nod to the grindhouse scene as well on 42nd Street.
See, I get kind of confused with this film though, because the Maniac Cop is like a fucking ninja. You know, he much like Jason Voorhees, he kind of just wanders the streets and happens to come across these innocent people in these dark corners. And then all of a sudden it just cuts back to, obviously, the police HQ, and you follow Tom Atkins' character going around investigating all these different murders. And then you get the involvement of Bruce Campbell's character and his wife, who is offed by the Maniac Cop to set him up. So you're like, oh, kind of getting quite dramatic now. You know, he's not just wandering around stabbing people left or right, but then he is. And I'm like, ah.
Well, from the way I saw it was that Tom Atkins was investigating these murders.
Yeah.
And he's the one who's bringing it to the chief commissioner, who you might know is played Shaft.
You're damn right.
As the police commissioner Pike in this film. And he's just like, no, forget it, you're crazy. Have you heard what you're saying? This person's dead. Yada yada.
Yeah.
And Bruce Campbell doesn't actually turn up in the movie until like 25-30 minutes in.
Yeah.
And which first time watching the film, I was quite surprised. I expected him to be sort of the leading character.
Yeah.
And then when we are introduced to him, I was so disappointed. Bruce Campbell was playing an absolute douchebag in this movie.
He is an asshole. That whole sequence, he's getting ready and his wife is like questioning him and he's like, look, we're going to go away for the weekend and we're going to, sort out our marriage and everything's going to be fine.
I'll make it up to you over the weekend. We'll go for a ride in the country. We'll go on up to Tarryton like, hey, don't pull away from me.
And then she follows him and finds him in bed with another woman. I'm like, fuck!
You found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly.
Fucking hell, Bruce!
Watching him try and worm his way out of that scene. But that's how he gets kind of set up for the murders.
Yeah.
His wife is killed in that hotel room, and so the evidence sort of points to him. Whether that was intentional from the Maniac Cop or not, I'm not sure, because he's the sort of character that's sort of out for justice or revenge against the police force.
Yeah.
So, sort of his trying to understand the logic behind the killing pattern, as you will, as well as Tom Atkins is trying to figure out. Sort of, it builds to the revenge against the commissioners and those that might have possibly covered something up. It sort of alludes to the fact that the script might have been written knowing that it was going to be explored in a later movie, but the hints of it are layered within this movie, and it sort of gives the Maniac Cop a little bit more credence as a character.
Yeah.
Especially when we see the flashbacks to what happened to him in the prison, and he's kind of a sympathetic character.
He is, yeah.
However, he's now become much like Jason Voorhees in that terms that he's come back to avenge those that wouldn't help him.
Yeah, by offing off innocent people in the dark alleys and streets. It's the Maniac Cop. I mean, spoilers ahead. Matt Cordell's character, played by the awesome Robert Zadar, fucking giant guy.
He is massive. I mean, I think they joked on set because they had Robert Zadar and Bruce Campbell there, both well known for their massive chins.
I just love the way with the Maniac Cop, they hide his face throughout most of the movie. It's shots where you're even full frontal on. Matt is looking down at the floor while he's throwing somebody through a wall. He's just
the camera work obscures his face all the time, either with shadows or framing.
Yeah.
And it's a very traditional horror trope where you don't show the creature until the end. Because when they do show him at the end, and you can see some of the poor sort of makeup effects that they had, they do look a little bit tacky. And he just grimaces at the camera, and that's his angry face, or his maniac face, and it doesn't hold up too well now, but it was enough to cement the character just from the sheer size of him and the way that he overpowers everybody with just simple movements. He can just simply pick people up and snap their necks. I think Jason Voorhees and Mike Myers would have a hard time restraining the Maniac Cop.
Yeah. his silhouette. I mean, I always find it funny that he's just wearing a nice clean uniform
all
every
the
time
time
you see him. He could have just killed like 3 or 4 people and got all bloodied, but then he's got nice and white gloves and his suit's all pressed, and he's just shined his shoes before he's gone out and offed a couple more.
See, I kind of wonder where he's getting all these suits from, because the police officers always say that there's never been anyone like him on the force of that size.
Yeah.
So those uniforms must have been custom made for him. So he must have sort of supernatural police uniform cleaning powers or something.
See, the backstory as well. He's killed in prison, and he's presumed dead. But then the mortician hears a heartbeat and then just sends his body away. Is he undead? Is he back at life? Is he just a super zombie cop?
Well, they comment that the fact that his hands were freezing cold to the touch, and he was presumably brain dead if he was alive, because he does hear that sort of very, very faint heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I would think that it was perhaps zombie-like, but in the old sort of traditional sense that perhaps somebody was controlling him.
Yeah.
And so after Tom Atkins sort of gets some more backstory from one of the other desk police officers, he investigates one of the other female officers there, and they find sort of the history that he had a girlfriend, and I presume that she was controlling him somehow to get revenge, but it doesn't quite turn out that way.
She was helping him get into, obviously,
and feeding him
information, but it's like he is way smart. He has got all these awesome outfits. He knows exactly where to be at exactly what point. He knows it just the police HQ moment is absolutely brilliant. You've got Bruce Campbell in a interrogation room being talked to by his two friend cops, and Tom Atkins leaves, and then Bruce Campbell and the girl get up to leave as well, and all the cops are dead.
Hey, what's the matter with you? Didn't you hear the buzzer? What are you, deaf?
He's just stealth killed the entire police station.
Stealth killed everybody, and they're not just like throat slit left on the side. There are people hanging from the ceiling. You know, guys are just pressed up against bars where they've had their heads squashed, and I'm like, what the fuck?
How did he silently kill all of these officers without a single alarm being raised? And then, of course, we get to sort of the dramatic shift moment in the movie where Tom Atkins is killed off, and you're like, whoa, you really don't expect that to happen. You expect him to sort of follow the case through. And that's where the torch is sort of passed to Bruce Campbell to bring down the Maniac Cop. And of course, because he's also been framed for the murders, it sort of adds to that tension and drama.
I kind of felt good for Matt once he'd killed everybody, and I was just like, now you should just stop. But then he just started carrying on killing. I was like, you're going to get in trouble for this.
He's the Maniac Cop.
Jesus. Maniac Cop? How's that for a tag?
So, favourite scene from Maniac Cop?
Any of the scenes with Bruce Campbell, they are just absolutely awesome. Even though he does start off as a bit of a dick, you kind of warm to him later on. You know, he does become the hero and has his traditional throwing himself into just the inanimate movable object, which is the Maniac Cop. Any of his scenes as well, just the two of them work so brilliantly together. The storyline, you can take it or leave it, but it's just a giant cop with a truncheon just killing people.
See, I love the Sam Raimi method of torturing Bruce Campbell on set, where at the end of the movie, where the Maniac Cop's driving in the police wagon and Bruce Campbell's tied up in the back, and he's just bouncing around left and right. You can imagine that was just on a set, and the car and the van wasn't moving, and they're like, Bruce, now just throw yourself around. Which is interesting because Sam Raimi does also have a cameo appearance in the movie, and he actually shot some of the footage that helped financiers back the movie.
Yeah.
So there's just that little tangent there. I think the most memorable scene in the movie for me that sort of sums up Maniac Cop is the scene where there's a woman, she's driving a car, and a police car pulls up behind her, and the public are already terrified of police officers. Instantly, they're fearful. And so as the officer comes up and taps on her window, she just pulls a gun and blasts his brains straight out.
You're not gonna get me.
And it was almost kind of justified because everyone else was also afraid and they're really sympathetic to her.
Yeah.
Which would just almost render the police service inert as a result. So I thought that scene just absolutely just highlighted everything that the film was trying to get across.
Yeah.
But the funniest scene in the movie for me, I think, has got to be the scene where Tom Atkins and Rick Roundtree are talking, and he says to him, "We don't ever see you smile," and it just cuts to him giving the most awkward, forced, painful smile I've seen since Arnie trying to smile in Terminator. There is also another funny moment with Bruce Campbell as well, where he's escaping the police station and he's got a gun to the other two officers, and he tells them to put their guns down.
I didn't do any of this.
Sure you didn't.
Put your guns over there. All right. On your face, both of you.
And he runs off, and the two officers are just laying there looking at each other like, should we follow him? And he's like, well, you heard him. It wasn't him.
It wasn't him.
May have gone after him.
You heard him. He didn't do it.
I definitely recommend Maniac Cop. I wasn't going to originally because I hadn't seen the film in a very long time, sort of since the early 90s that I saw the movie, and it's kind of, I always thought it was a bit meh. I never got sort of the Bruce Campbell satisfaction that I get from his other movies in Maniac Cop. I didn't like that he was only in it for a bit part, and I thought it was a mediocre slasher movie. It's only now after rewatching the movie that I've enjoyed it so much more. It almost felt like an event, getting the Blu-ray and watching this restored version of this movie. I definitely recommend. If you're a horror enthusiast, Maniac Cop is the film that should be on your shelf. It is one of the greatest horror movies of that genre.
I highly recommend Maniac Cop to any hardcore horror fans. It's not the best. I mean, Jason does top him, Freddy as well, but it's a scary thought of having this super zombie undead police officer walking the streets.
Help! Help me! Help me!
Which brings us on to Maniac Cop 2, which came out 2 years later in 1990. Also written by Larry Cohen and directed by William Lustig. Ian, why don't you give us the synopsis for Maniac Cop 2?
Officer Cordell is dead. People are safe to walk the streets again. Or are they? Matt Cordell is back. At the end of the Maniac Cop 1, we saw his hand come out of the water. And we knew that he was going to be coming back. Start of the second one, he is back. Fresh new uniforms from wherever. He's got a car. Everything is just upped and anteed. He is just on a massive killing spree of just police officers this time.
Just like every good sequel should have. It ups everything by double, if not triple, especially in this movie.
Goodness is his own reward, eh?
It's interesting that it's sort of the timeline of the movie seems to have shifted slightly.
Yeah.
Where I'm not quite sure how much time has passed since the first movie to the second one.
I think
it's St. Patrick's Day parade in the first movie, and the second movie sort of, I'm pretty sure there's Christmas decorations.
Yeah, it's close to Christmas.
So I'm like, wow, like 8 months must have passed between the two movies. And then there's a scene with Bruce Campbell, and he's like, yeah, well, I just saw him on the pier like yesterday.
Right, but you see, we both just saw him on the pier, so what? Does that make us nuts?
So is this the day after? But he's been cleared of all charges, and so the characters are kind of deciding what to do with their lives and trying to decide whether the story should be covered up or not, whether they're going to look insane, to whether they're going to carry on the police work.
Yeah,
and so we saw that Laura Landon's character in the first movie sort of became the film's heroine in a way, where she took charge more. She took took the shotgun and she was ready to go in and take Matt Cordell on. And so in the second movie, she's just like, no, fuck you all. This actually happened.
Yeah.
He was a fucking zombie, and
He's still alive.
You're starting with these ghost stories again? Cordell died in Sing Sing more than 2 years ago. I want you to see this police psychologist.
What?
I'm not going to subscribe to your bullshit. I'm going to go out there and prove that this is actually happening. And Bruce Campbell's just like, no, stress from the job.
I killed him.
You know, if this is the official line that the department's going to use, great.
No, that's a lie.
It's, again, I'm like, such a douchebag character.
This brings me on again to the super zombie cop. I mean, at the end of the first one, we saw Cordell impaled by a pipe and fall into the river. And then obviously he's back in the second one and he's looking quite bloated.
His head looks massive in this movie. I thought he was wearing like a super mask. I actually thought it was a different actor. I was just like, what have they done? I don't know whether it was the lighting but unfortunately, I mean, you can say unfortunate, but Robert Z'Dar does have a big head.
Yeah,
it's
a bit of a disfigurement because of his bones, but it works for him because obviously he's just a big guy and he looks quite imposing.
Completely.
But then layering on the makeup on top of it, it just looked really out of place. But like in the first movie, they do try to avoid seeing him and just having his silhouetted figure walking the streets and offing police officers.
But he's got some new moves this time, the way he swings the truncheon, and you get more character traits of the Maniac Cop in the second movie.
You don't talk much, but that's okay. Was it the accident, same one that screwed your face up? I didn't mean to offend you now. I'm sorry if I did.
It's the way that he sort of makes other characters around him react by his presence, by just not saying anything, just by his simple presence. Other characters sort of work around him, and that's because we're introduced to sort of his companion or sidekick. I don't know. Who is this other serial killer?
This here's my place. Home sweet home.
My first name is Stephen. Why don't you go ahead and sit down?
Who's going around killing strippers and
Yeah.
dancers. And which is also interesting that William Lustig originally wanted Joe Spinell to play that part because he was the actor who played Maniac in the other movies, and he wanted the same actor to reprise that role to sort of join the two movie universes together. But unfortunately, that actor died, and so this film is in tribute to the original Maniac actor. But the actor that they did choose for this movie does give quite a charismatic performance as a fucking douchebag serial killer. I'm like, how am I laughing and enjoying the comedy?
Your thoughts are in my mind. I got you figured out, man. We ain't running away. Nah, we're getting stronger.
Yeah!
Because we got ourselves a leader.
I don't want a part of this. I'm not gonna let this stay
When he and Matt make friends, you know, as they call it, and he takes him back to his little apartment, they just kind of sit there and just have this whole conversation piece. Everybody else
One-way conversation.
Yeah, one-way conversation. Everybody else is running around frantically, you know, believing that Matt's still alive and trying to deny the fact that he's come back from the dead.
Ooh, you got a big one too.
And these two are just sat there, just chilling out, like, so what are you going to do, Matt? And Matt's just like... And then Matt will just get up, you know, and get up and just go off. And it leads to the ultimate police station assault. Matt Cordell once again walks into a police station and just lays waste.
Terminator style. He goes walking through plate glass, walking through walls, just gun at arm length, just blasting away cops. There's blood squibs flying up the walls, up the doors, glass, ceilings, bodies falling everywhere. He's chucking cops through. It's insane. I put this on almost on par with the Terminator sequence. The action in this movie is fantastic.
Yeah.
The car chase sequences, the shootout sequences, all of the stunts.
That's right, ain't wrong. Don't change your shorts, baby. Cause this ride just started.
They just upped everything from the first movie to 10.
Yeah.
And it's so engrossing to watch. You'd think they'd be dated now, but you know that there's no CGI and that they're all practical effects, and you're just like, wow, they really got their shit together with this movie.
It is imbalanced, though, by the fact that Bruce Campbell reprises his role, of course, but with other contracts coming up, he just had himself killed off.
Hey, let's see what they said about Therese.
So you do see his character knifed pretty much at the beginning, and we are then given Robert Davi from License to Kill, who kind of plays an occult kind of, you know, hard-nosed, burnt-out cop.
He's a detective.
Yeah, who's you know, he's investigating the serial killer who was obviously connected to Cordell, and then obviously brings Davi into Cordell, but he literally does nothing.
What about it?
Well, he's the one who ends up investigating and sort of picking up the pieces after sort of Tom Makin's character from the first movie.
Yeah.
And trying to make the links. And very quickly, actually, links it all the way back and around to who the Maniac Cop is.
Yeah,
and
where's he
who's
from?
responsible and who sort of covered it up.
I want you to reopen the Cordell case. Get some judge to set aside his conviction, and then dig up his empty coffin. That's right, it's going to be empty.
Come
Then I
on.
want you to bury it again with a police honor
You're
guard.
fucking crazy, you know that?
Cordell got too close to you people at City Hall who were taking payoffs. So you framed him, put him in a fucking rat hole and set him up. You murdered him.
And sort of forces the confession from him.
Yeah.
Which, to the film's sort of detriment, they kind of used the same footage from the first movie to
Yeah.
show the flashback. And it is quite a drawn-out sequence that didn't really need to be in there. I mean...
Yeah, like I said, that just kind of confused me about Cordell, because he's trying to he's killing all these people so that he can get to the commissioner and the mayor, But then as Robert Davi gets the order revoked, you know, Cordell becomes, you know, manual again. You know, he decides that, right, okay, I've finished killing now.
Where's Foxy going? I don't know, man. Don't leave me. Tell me what to do.
But it kind of, you have Claudia Christian's character who takes a more vital role. She's trying to investigate Mallory and Bruce Campbell's character, and then obviously gets involved with Robert Davi, and obviously then gets involved with Cordell and gets dragged all the way to the prison. And then we have the ultimate prison sequence as well.
Terrific. She puts on a uniform and immediately gets taken hostage. What's up, cop?
I like the fact that every surviving character from the first movie is killed off brutally in the second film. I've got to say that Bruce Campbell's death in Maniac Cop 2, as early as it is really poor. It's just, it's such a, I mean, of all of the characters or actors that you could kill off in a lame way, it's not going to be Bruce Campbell.
Do me a favor, will you? Don't put that in your report.
Jack, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give her a negative valuation.
And it's been said, I mean, you can watch YouTube footage of fans asking Bruce Campbell what happened on Maniac Cop 2, and he gets irate, and he will bitterly call out any fan that questions him on that movie. It's he was going through a divorce at the time of making Maniac Cop 2 as well, and he was considering himself a more legitimate actor as well. He wanted to take on higher brow roles and not do hammy sequels. Army of Darkness.
You gotta understand, man. I never even saw these assholes before.
Cordell is just a killing machine. I do think it's funny though. He manages to blag his way into the prison, and he's walking around, and obviously the serial killer believes that they're there to release all of the other prisoners and they're going to lead an army. But once Robert Davi obviously convinces the mayor to revoke the order on Cordell, Cordell just kind of walks off, and a prisoner runs up and Molotovs him. And I'm like, you had that Molotov in your cell the whole time? He was just like, I'm just going to keep this just in case an undead zombie cop comes in and attacks me. I do also think it's also brilliant that you have Danny Trejo playing the silent convict in the cell. You follow the serial killer into the police station, and you just have Machete just lying there. And I'm like, come on, Machete, get up, do something. And
I was like, brilliant, we're going to see Machete go up against the Maniac Cop. And then the camera sort of cuts him off where you can just see the top of his hairline. And then the scene later, where's he gone?
He's gone.
He's just disappeared. I was so disappointed.
Missed out on the feature there.
So, favourite scene from Maniac Cop 2, Iain?
Oh, my most favourite scene from Maniac Cop 2, barring the police station sequence, is the Molotov at the end. It's one of probably the longest Burning Man sequences I've seen in a long time. He walks around on fire, kills off 3 or 4 prisoners that obviously killed him in the original one, and then the serial killer grabs him, and the two of them bash through a wall, fall into a police bus, and the whole thing just fucking explodes. And I'm like... Shit!
There's supposed to be a third movie? How are they going to bring him back now? He's fucking, that explosion would have just been nothing left.
He's Cordell.
I don't particularly have a favourite scene in Maniac Cop 2 because I enjoyed the whole movie. It is a fantastic sequel. It really works. It fires on all cylinders. There's some really nice gags in there. There's some typical Larry Cohen script dialogue interactions in the movie. Just some witty banter back and forth that just make me chuckle every time I watch the movie.
McKinney! You okay?
Never better.
We were covering the front.
That's why I came around back.
All of the scenes with Matt Cordell they're also kind of humorous as well. I think that the police car looks absolutely menacing.
Yeah.
Again, I love all of the shots on the streets of New York. It is a fantastic set piece for the film. There's a lot of tension in all of the explosions and action. As a result of characters being killed off left, right, and center, you've got no idea who's going to make it to the end of the movie. It's a thrill ride. It is a fantastic sequel, and you should definitely watch Maniac Cop 2. It's great.
If you've seen the first one, definitely follow up with the second one. Cordell is just a fucking killing machine.
Which brings us on to Maniac Cop 3, Badge of Silence, which follows Maniac Cop 2 and came out in 1993, so 3 years gap between the two movies, and of course again directed by William Lustig for the most part. This film had a very troubled production. Like I said, it sort of came at the end of the Grindhouse era, so getting finance for a movie is a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
They needed a raised budget for all of the effects that they wanted, and so a studio got involved. And there was a lot of disagreements between Lustig and the studio. When Lustig finished the first cut of the movie, it was only 51 minutes long, and the studio told him that he needs to go and pad this movie out, and he just said fuck you and walked off the set and never came back. He didn't even oversee the editing like he did the other movies, and so the producer of the movie actually had to finish the film.
Yeah.
And for me, that is why Maniac Cop 3 is so disappointing, especially coming off the back of Maniac Cop 2. Iain, wouldn't you give us the synopsis for Maniac Cop 3, Badge of Silence?
Well, at the end of Maniac Cop 2, we saw Robert Davi throw Cordell's badge onto his coffin. Cordell's hand smashes through and takes the badge back, which obviously we believe will lead up to number 3. With the start of number 3, we have a voodoo priest casting a spell at the exact same time as the funeral, and as he finishes the spell by stabbing a knife into a decapitated head, Cordell's body comes back to life. Now we're led to believe that the voodoo priest has control of Cordell, but Cordell has his own plan by stalking another police officer called Maniac Kate, who's just been gunned down in a grocery store robbery. She is in a hospital, and so Cordell then stalks the corridors of the hospital to try and get her body.
It's very difficult to understand the motivations of the Maniac Cop in this film. I did like and appreciate the way that we're seeing the Maniac Cop be resurrected. Very much so like we've seen Chucky be resurrected in all of the Child's Play movies through voodoo artifacts and spells and incantations and things like that. We get to see how the Maniac Cop has been brought back for the third time, or for the second time technically, because I don't necessarily know whether this voodoo priest had actually brought him back any of the other times, or how he came back in the first place.
Yeah.
Because he explains to us that Matt Cordell, when he died, wanted to be resurrected to enact vengeance.
Unanswered cry. Justice.
However, the process is so painful that he's eternally tormented and tortured, as yet again we see the flashback to the first movie where we see the entire sequence of the judge hitting the hammer, sending him to jail, getting stabbed, getting killed, getting resurrected. And so I was like, okay, so I do actually like where this is going, but it doesn't. So I was like, so what is the priest's motivation for doing it in the first place, barring that there isn't none?
There isn't any.
Can you be a little more specific?
It's just so, okay, so the Maniac Cop in this movie is, I figured he was going to continue his revenge and go and hunt down the mayor and the cops yet again.
But he'd already been cleared in Maniac Cop 2. He was at peace, but he still wanted to come back and kill all these people for...
So,
but then he goes to the hospital. We're given Robert Davi again, and he plays a more action-packed part in this film.
Absolutely.
And he is friends with the main cop woman who's horribly gunned down. Really, that sequence in itself is slightly over the top. I believe
I got a very Paul Verhoeven RoboCop feel from that robbery
you got
scene.
The guy with the shotgun. He's just blowing cops away left and right, and she goes in there and she goes in there with this submachine gun and just fucking lays waste to the shop. He runs into the bulletproof room at the back, and then she climbs up on the roof, jumps down, kills him, and then realizes that the store clerk was in on the robbery as well and is obviously gunned down. Rushed then to hospital, you then have Robert Davi in the hospital kind of having a one-on-one with the female doctor who's looking after his friend, and then Cordell just turns up.
And I was like, holy shit, they're gonna kill off the officer. I was like, it's just gonna be like the other movies where they kill off returning cast members. And just in that instance, the Maniac Cop returns back into the shadows again and just disappears.
Yeah, he stands outside the hospital just staring at Kate's room. And you have that sequence where the guy comes running up to him and he just starts giving him shit. Like, yeah, you're a fucking asshole and I hate cops and all this. You don't think this is the Wild West. And Cordell just grabs him, throws him up in the air, shoots him 3 times with his pistol.
And I was like, that is badass. It's like, that's Maniac Cop right there.
The kills in Maniac Cop 3 are probably the real only draw point. The story is shady at best, but you do have some imaginative kills. You have a doctor grabbed and just laid in front of an x-ray machine, and Cordell just turns it on and walks off. I'm like,
that is one of the most sadistic kills he gives in the entire trilogy.
Well, I mean, what about the defibrillator? He chases another doctor onto a roof and then just defibrillates his face until he burns. So I'm like, fucking hell. Everything. Cordell is just like a ninja. He just walks around the corridors of this hospital just offing people whenever he feels like it. But at the same time, it's also a bit of a weakness as well because they confine him to this hospital and it's slightly unrealistic that this busy hospital and all the other scenes that we see, he just happens to find the quiet spots that he can walk around. I'm like...
Well, it turns out that he's actually using a sewer system, which is something that I figured he was doing by the second movie.
Yeah.
And so we get the idea that he's sort of able to silently move around wherever he needs to be, wherever the writers need him to be. Which I also do think, I do like some of the angles that the story takes in this movie, because I was led to believe that the Maniac Cop was protecting this other officer because she seems to have been framed, because from the CCTV footage of the robbery, it looks like she just pulled a gun and killed the other girl that was in there. And obviously Maniac Cop knows that she was defending herself from the other girl, but the officers don't know that.
How would he know? Is he like now he's a psychic super zombie cop?
We got something here.
What?
It was an inside job. Poor Katie.
This'll clear, won't it?
I hope so. Let's go.
Which is why we end up following the news reporters or the other sort of reporters that are sort of feeding off the horrors that are happening in the city by trying to go to the most disturbing crime scene to get footage.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that actually filmed the entire sequence, but they never really handed that footage in.
No, they only handed in an edited version so that they could get money from, obviously...
Framing
the police officer. But then, obviously, Cordell is psychic enough to know that they filmed it. So then there's a sequence where the two guys are driving in their car and they're on the police van and they hear about a drive-by and there's a child has been killed. So they're like, oh, score, we're going to make the money from this news footage. They drive there and then you have this really sympathetic part where one of the reporters is recording this boy and the boy is giving a description about what's happened. You know, there was a drive-by, what kind of weapon it was, and the fact that it was his sister. So the guy then goes to find his friend and you just have this ambulance. And he's like, okay, maybe the little girl's on the back. He opens the back, sees his friend, two paramedics, all dead, and then gets killed by Cordell. And I'm like, He set this up like Jigsaw. You know, I need an ambulance, I need this, I need that. I'm just going to kill this guy off. Then I'm going to take the tape and I'm going to give it to Robert Davi and then release the criminal so that the criminal can distract Robert Davi while I kidnap Kate. So then I can marry her with the voodoo priest like a Bride of Frankenstein thing.
Well, that's what the whole crux of this movie seems to be, where Maniac Cop, because he's got this tortured soul, he wants a female maniac to work alongside him. And it was just like, so yeah, this is Bride of Frankenstein, this is Bride of Chucky, this is Bride of Maniac Cop.
What we do here is good. To unite two tortured souls in holy matrimony.
That's bullshit.
No, I don't like it.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's a shame, really, because obviously the original Maniac Cop is just absolutely outstanding. The second one is just action over the top, and then you come to the third one with this muddled story. But as a bonus, you still have Robert Z'Dar reprising his role as Cordell,
and the makeup effects do look much, much better in this movie.
Yeah, he does have a few more lines in this film than just the one he had in the second, but
finish it.
He is just this massive, imposing figure. One of the scenes I do think is really funny is just before he releases the criminal from the bed in the hospital. They show two scenes from Maniac Cop 2 where he kicks in a door and then shoots two cops on the stairway. That sequence was in the second one as he walks into the police HQ, and I saw it in the third one like, you cheap bastards!
Reusing footage again.
And then Cordell just walks into the room and just hands the criminal a gun and then handcuffs, the keys to the handcuffs so that the criminal can escape. And the criminal goes out the other way with the security door, so he kills the cop. And I'm like, why didn't you just go out that door?
See, I like to see those scenes as just the Maniac Cop just making diversions and distractions for the other officers so that he can continue his mission. And then we have the confrontation with the Maniac Cop sort of standing there with his shotgun, standing behind the preacher, just like, do the ritual, do the ritual.
I cannot recover this soul.
And you're like, okay, let's watch how this goes down. And the film does have quite a climactic explosion in there, and I was just like, oh, okay, it's over now. Okay, end it as you will.
Oh, McKenny, it's you.
I'm waiting for the credits, the sort of music's playing out, and then the big action sequence kicks in again.
What's going on back there? Get the hell out of here!
I thought it was brilliant. Robert Davi is there, and he's got the female doctor with him, and they're speeding down the highway. You've got Cordell on fire in the police car trying to just grab them. You know, but Cordell is just smacking cars out of the way.
He's just pushing cars out of the way. It's that strong.
Robert Davi pulls out his gun and unloads a whole clip into him, and then carries on driving, and then reloads and just carries on shooting. I'm like, didn't you work out that didn't work 2 minutes ago? Just stop shooting him.
And the fact that he's on fire the entire time.
Yeah.
I was just like, they are just upping the ante again from the second movie, where they've got like a 15-minute action sequence with him being on fire the entire time. And of course, we do sort of get that typical trope where they throw in a canister, a la sort of Jaws, and just sort of wait for the crescendo explosion. Okay, now I definitely think the Maniac Cop is dead.
Possibly.
Although they have gone on to say that there has been talks about doing a reboot, about remaking the Maniac
Definitely
Cop.
a remake.
There is also ideas floating around about actually making a fourth movie, just because as a last, closing scene of Maniac Cop 3, we see the female cop's body laid down, and then we see the Maniac Cop reach over and grab her hand. It's just like, yeah, the Maniac Cop is not done yet. He's going to turn up in the next movie, pristine uniform, and maybe
Reloaded
just a few
gun.
extra scars. Favorite scene though from Maniac Cop 3? And
most of my favorite scenes were just the kills, but they were too easy to follow with. But my ultimate scene has to be where Cordell has kidnapped Maniac Kate from the hospital, and he's walking into the tunnels to get to the church. And as he's walking up this tunnel, his head just hits all the light bulbs all the way up and just smashes all the light bulbs. And I'm like... Brilliant. I think that he went that way.
See, I mean, that there is the sort of... I don't know whether it's the direction of Bill Lustig or whether that's just the writing of Larry Cohen.
Yeah.
I think that these two guys were sort of at the peak of their filmmaking creativity when they made this trilogy, because there is some really funny gags in all three movies. The witty banter between the characters, again in the third movie, is razor sharp. All of the lines that they give just make you chuckle every time. And so all of those scenes, I can't really pick one, are my favourites. And obviously my favourite kill is the 3 shots to the body before it lands. Fantastic. I don't particularly recommend Maniac Cop 3 to everybody. You should only really watch this if you are a fan of the first 2 movies, because it does complete the set, despite the troubled production that it had.
Yeah.
There's still some craft and encapsulates everything that I love about horror movies. So as an interesting piece, it's part of the collection. You should watch all 3 movies. Definitely.
I only recommend the third one to obviously hardcore fans as well. If you've watched the first one and you've seen the second one, following with the third one, you're only really there to see Cordell make kills. The story, it's a bit jumbled in places. You might get behind Robert Davi and his twin Beretta bed rolling down the corridor sequence, but mainly for Cordell and Robert Zadar.
You have the right to remain silent. Forever. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
Goodness, this is her reward, eh?